Hello, hello. Good to have you here. Good to be here with you again on Surviving to Thriving for Highly Sensitives. And every week we talk about something related to high sensitivity that helps those of us who are highly sensing to navigate the world a little bit more easily, because we do live in a place that is not designed for high sensitivity. And it can be really challenging, but we also know that it can be really amazing. So that's the purpose of this show. And I am your guest. No, I'm your guide, and you're my guest and a high sensitivity coach. And I'm just here to impart any kind of information that I can, and then have a little chat about how we can use various tools and ideas to really move beyond that place of struggle to really thriving. So glad to have you here as always. And this month I'm talking about changing mindset or shifting mindset so that we can just not be focused on all the things that aren't working, and that we can give ourselves a little boost to make things work a little better. So I do like starting with a quote when I remember to do that. And so I've gotten one today that I just love, and it's from Gandhi. And you've probably heard it if you've followed any of his stuff, but I just think it's so powerful. So as I did last time, if you'd like to go ahead and just close your eyes or soften your gaze and really listen to this quote, that might just be a little bit more impactful. Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. He was a very aware, very bright man, obviously, and I just love this quote because it just kind of gives you that idea of that trajectory of what happens from the start of what our beliefs are to what the reality is in terms of what we're experiencing and what our actions are. And if we are experiencing these things that we don't like, or we're getting, feedback on something that's not working, that people aren't liking that we are doing, we can step back and say, what is it? Where does this all start from? And it generally starts from those beliefs. And I'm going to apologize in advance. We have some smoke issues, wildfire smoke happening with some allergies at the same time. So I might be clearing my throat now and then. I have kind of a thick, scratchy throat today. Try to keep that at a minimum. But let's talk about, in terms of this mindset idea, being aware of our beliefs, the power of intention. And I've talked about that before, how powerful that is. We can have an idea, but if we're not really being aware to the point of having a specific intention, then things can kind of just, fall by the wayside or just not have the impact that it would normally if we're really aware and we really put our intention out there for what it is that we're wanting or changing, or the way we want to feel, whatever those things are. And that intention is just key. Awareness and then intention. And, there's that adage where energy goes, or where attention goes, energy flows. So even if we're not consciously aware of it, if we are thinking along a certain line, everything about us, especially our energy, is going to go in that direction. So if we're not conscious and aware of it, then it can be going in completely the opposite direction that we think it's going in, because we're conscious of, this is what I want, this is what I want. But if we're listening to all of these other things that are sending us in another direction, those are the automatic default, systems that tell us, yeah, but this is what the reality is. And a lot of that comes, as I've talked before, about our programming, or from our programming, that we don't even know is happening. Maybe we got these ideas from our parents or from friends or from just experiences that we had, especially when we were younger. And these things get in our way, but we don't even know that they're getting in our way because they're not conscious. So being aware, as much as possible, and then really, really trying to dive in and use a variety of different techniques to find out what those statements are, those beliefs that become our thoughts, that become our words, as Gandhi was talking about. So if we talk about this idea again, that, everything is energy, it's really important to realize that not only is intention important and yeah, okay, everything is energy, but it's not just like the physical things that we're, sitting on or doing, or the energy we feel from other people, which we're very aware of as highly sensing people, right? We definitely are aware that we pick up on energy, but everything is energy, including our thoughts, including our words. And everything has a certain vibration, and our bodies, our systems resonate at a certain level. And so when we are constantly revisiting something that has a lower vibration, that is not helping us, that is keeping us stuck, then we shift into that mode and function at that resonant level instead of that higher vibration that we want. And again, if that's on automatic, autopilot, we don't know it's happening. And so we're like, why, I'm trying to think of this positive thing. I'm having these positive thoughts, and there's nothing wrong with positive thoughts or positive affirmations, but we need to be aware of what might be circumventing that direction. We're trying to have these amazing positive thoughts, and we want those to work. And there's something else that's holding us back or pulling us back. So the power of words, super important, and being aware. So one thing that's really helpful is to be able to get in a really quiet place, whether that's meditation or just taking some nice deep breaths somewhere in a quiet space, and just go in and pay attention and ask ourselves these questions. And sometimes they're challenging. Sometimes we don't come up with anything. We're like, I don't know what this is. But if we sit with it for a little bit, sometimes these things will pop up. And we can always ask others, hey, do you have any ideas on, what might be going on? Because they see things that we don't, right? So as people that we trust, we can ask. But if we ask ourselves, what is it about? So if we have something that's happening that we're not okay with, we say, what could this be coming from? And we step all the way back to beliefs. What are my beliefs about this situation? Okay, I know I can do this. I know I can do this. I know I can do this. Those are the positive affirmations, the mantra you're going over and over and over. And you say, but something's in my way. It's not happening. And you say, what is my belief about this? And maybe there's a belief in there that says, yeah, well, all the positive thoughts really, really great. But the reality is that stuff doesn't work for me. And so what's going to happen, that's going to be the default, the repeated over and over and over. Anytime you're trying to do something positive in a certain direction, that belief is going to pop up, and that leads to those thoughts. Oh yeah, I can't actually do that. I know I really, really want to, and it makes sense that would work, but it's really not going to. And most of the time that is still at a subconscious level. We don't realize we're doing it unless we start asking that. So, okay, what is this? Where does this come from? I have these beliefs that are getting in my way. And then you can do something with those. And like everything else, it takes practice. We can't just usually, for most people, it doesn't work for me anyway. I can't just go, oh, that's that belief, and then become aware of it. And then suddenly it's all fine. I still have to reprogram my whole system. I have to practice being in a different place, having that different thought, reminding myself, this is the new reality. I'm letting go of that one. And some techniques like tapping can be really effective for creating that shift in a really short period of time. And if we're doing it just on our own, just, sitting quietly and saying, oh, okay, this is the belief that I have. What am I going to do with that? And then spend some time, journaling or revisiting it before you go to bed, when you wake up first thing in the morning. What are those thoughts that I'm shifting? I'm getting rid of this one and I'm moving into this, and just focusing on that new one in a way that's very purposeful. So one thing that's really interesting about our subconscious is that it, for some reason, only recognizes, not necessarily positive words, but straightforward words. So when we do like a double negative, or we have a qualifier of a word, that usually isn't picked up. It's more direct. For example, if we say, okay, I have, say there's a pain. So like I have low back pain. I mean, that's pretty common for a lot of people. So you can say, I have low back pain. I don't want to have that anymore. So one of the thoughts that we want to shift that to, And maybe we find out, oh, I have this because I have this belief. Well, my mom always had low back pain, so I'm obviously going to have it. Maybe that's where this belief came from. It's good to be aware of that. If that's where it is, maybe it's something completely different, but we're aware of that. And so now what we need to do is instill this new idea, and to follow the rules of the subconscious, we need to try to avoid all of the negative words or the negating words. So if we say, I have no pain, that seems reasonable, right? I don't have pain. That's great. But the subconscious hears the pain part, and the no pain, it's odd, but it just doesn't seem to work quite so well. So we can say, even though that word is still there, we could say pain-free, but we could say, I am, comfortable and relaxed and my body feels amazing, or things like that. We can try to not use any of those qualifiers or negative words. I am comfortable and free. I am mobile. I can do whatever I want and feel relaxed and at peace, whatever those words are. So we can pay attention to even what we're trying to actually directly tell our subconscious with our new story, our new belief, and try to be very, very specific. If it's really generalized and nebulous, it's not really going to help very much. We have to be very clear and very positive, and try to avoid all of those, negating words. Another thing that's really good for dealing with the subconscious is letting go of these qualifiers, again, if you will, of what we want or what we need, and try to remove those. Because again, if we have that word in our system, excuse me, somewhere, then what the subconscious hears is those words. So if we say, I want this, and that's, I'm putting my focus on, this is what I want, but your subconscious hears the want part, and then it stays in that place of want. And, again, it's kind of an odd thing. It's like, well, I have this positive thought, so I'm just going to think it, that I want whatever this thing is, and I'm going to keep putting my focus on that. But then again, that subconscious says, oh, we're just going to stay in this place of want. That, I get that. This is what we're wanting. Doesn't mean that it's going to happen or is happening, but we can want all the time. Okay. So then we stay in this mode of wanting, and that can be really frustrating, because we're saying, I'm putting this out there. This is what I want. This is what I want. And we're still in want. So if we can get rid of that and say, this is what I have, this is what's important to me, this is, what I'm grateful for. Especially gratitude is a huge factor in getting what we want. And what we're seeking is to have this gratitude as if it was already happening. And so that's another thing to follow up on this idea, is that when we are putting out those positive ideas, these beliefs, that we are now in this new place of, so for example, not being in lack, but being fulfilled or having plenty. We can think of it in those terms, but if we don't truly feel it, or it just doesn't feel right or true, then again, it doesn't really sit in very well. We have to imagine, this is the part of the neuroplasticity idea, mind over matter. We go there, right? As if it's already happening. So we have gratitude. And if you think about the word gratitude, it's, being thankful for something that we have. So if we have gratitude for something that's not yet here, it's telling our system that, oh, no, actually, we do have that. And so we can be grateful, obviously, for all of those things that we do already have, that we're aware of. And it's super good to be aware of that all the time, and put that out there, just to have that gratitude, not taking things for granted. But we can also do that for things that we don't yet have, and get ourselves in a place. Usually it's good to do that with something like meditation, or really deep breathing, or some kind of really focused inner time, and just sit there with this new idea until you can actually feel what it's like for that to happen. So what would it feel like to not have that back pain? And maybe if you are experiencing that, you can't get in a certain position that you can actually even feel that. And that's really challenging. But if you can get in the most comfortable position, whatever that is, that might be lying down, whatever that is, you can get close to it, but then just keep imagining, well, yeah, what does that feel like? What would that feel like if I didn't have that pain? Let's just imagine that. And then get to that place where you can, it's kind of like tricking your body, I guess, but it's more just being really purposeful and saying, no, I choose to not have that pain. And therefore I am pain-free. I am comfortable. And maybe that's a really good, it's like, I'm just comfortable right now. And if you're in pain, you're not going to be comfortable. So that's maybe a good replacement or reframing. And then just sit with that until you can imagine, and maybe you can, still have both senses, like, okay, I can imagine this, but really I'm still aware of this pain, but maybe kind of set that aside and say, well, this is one experience, but here's another one. Okay, what's that like to just be out of pain completely to where I can be comfortable, and sit with that until you're able to feel what that would be like. And then have gratitude for that. Oh, I'm so grateful for feeling comfortable. And that can be super, well, it is very, very powerful to be able to get to that place for our gratitude practice, where we're including those things that we don't yet have, or that we are seeking or moving toward, but being aware of it to that point where it feels true. It's already here. And then what happens is, because of the frequency involved, our bodies, our systems, our mind, everything says, oh, that's already a thing. Great. So now we operate under this new story. I am comfortable. I'm always comfortable. And so there's no room for that old story of I'm in pain. Of course I'm going to be in pain because, my mother was, or whatever, wherever that came from. All of that stuff just goes away, because now we're focused on the new reality of being comfortable. And it's not, again, what, do it in 5 minutes and you're like, oh, that's all I needed to do. Now everything's great, because we do fall back into those old patterns that, repeat over and over and over. Yeah, but so we have to catch ourselves for a while. And, depending on who you talk to, the ideas out there, you do something for 21 days. Sometimes people think that's actually longer now, but you do something over and over and over, and then it becomes a body memory, it becomes a habit, it becomes something that you don't have to focus on with specific, really deep intent. Excuse me. And so if we practice these things, continuously until they become the new norm, at some point that will shift. But if we do it, a little bit here, a little bit there, it's never really going to set in, because we then if we're not consciously aware of what we're doing there, then we default into that old system. So it's all about that awareness and the commitment to continuing and following through with it until it just is. That's just the new reality. So we've changed our story from, this is what I believed, now this is what I believe, and it is now the practice. It is now the reality, because I stuck with it and I practiced it and I believed it and I got to that place of feeling it. And I hope, as I'm talking about this, that it doesn't seem like I think this is super easy, because I'm always working on these with various, issues for myself, and remembering that, oh yeah, I did really well with this for about 3 days. And then it just kind of slid away. No wonder that's not working. So reminding ourselves, have your little sticky notes or your little timer that goes off, every day, 30 minutes after you get up, or something like that. And you say, oh, what's that timer for? Oh, right. Okay. Let me get to that place where this new reality, this thing I'm shifting is already here, and reinforce it and reinforce it and reinforce it. It'd be great if we could just do it once. Generally things don't happen that way. And again, something like tapping, or some people do NLP or hypnosis, those kinds of things, can definitely help push that along. But it's really great to have this practice just all the time. Okay, and then one final thing that I wanted to talk about is this idea of the placebo effect. You're probably familiar with that, and that's that neuroplasticity, again, mind over matter thing. If we believe something to be true, then it becomes true, because our mind is incredibly powerful. And all of that energy, again, resonates in that way that makes it happen. But it's really important to know that there is something also called the nocebo effect. So just as powerful as the placebo saying, I believe this, I believe this, I believe this, and then it comes true, the nocebo says, if you discount and say, I don't believe it, I don't believe it, it's not going to be true. So that's part of that, checking in with what those statements are that you're saying to yourself. If you think you've pretty much got it dialed in, but there's still that piece that's going, yeah, I don't believe it. It just can't, it can't be that easy, or it can't be that way, or that can't be true, or whatever that is. That, with that nocebo idea, that is going to be reinforced. And then that is going to be that reality. So just being aware that anytime you catch yourself with a negative statement or a discounting statement or something that says, yeah, but, then you're slipping into that nocebo effect to make that not happen. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will, which goes either direction, right? You can say, oh, no, I believe this totally. I put every ounce of my being and my belief into this, and then it becomes true because of that placebo effect, or that idea that our mind is so powerful and we have that intention. And then what happens with that is that it changes our frequency, and then we raise that vibration and we match the frequency of that new reality, and then it becomes the true reality, the new story. That was a lot of talking today. I know a lot of stuff. Again, I always bring back the idea of the energy because it's so powerful. So if you've been listening to me for a while, maybe that's getting a little bit more normalized. You're getting used to hearing that idea if that wasn't your idea before, this idea that everything is energy, but super, super powerful. So before we wrap up today, I want to give you just a little exercise to help you along this idea of shifting, releasing old beliefs and instilling new ones, just in a little experiential form. So if you can, and you want to, settle in, close your eyes, soften your gaze. If you're somewhere where you are by yourself and you can totally do this undisturbed, or, feel free to come back and pull it up later when you have the time to do that. If that's not going to work right now, a lot of times I know people are watching are listening when they're at work, and that might not work so well. So however you would like to do that, just to get nice and comfortable, upright position, so you got some really good energy flow. And now imagine that you're standing in front of a little path, and just notice what that looks like. You're outside somewhere, whatever is perfect for you in this moment. Could be similar to one that you've done before. It could be completely different. Maybe by the ocean, a river, in the forest, wherever you are. Notice what your path is made of. And then just start walking on that path. And just be aware of everything around you. Pay attention to smells and sights and sounds, and maybe even taste something in the air. What can you feel? Just be aware of everything around you as you're walking. Maybe even aware of what's underneath your feet, if you have shoes or not. Just being aware. And as we continue to walk a little bit, we come to a tree. And in other exercises, I've called this a worry tree. We can use that term if you like. It can be a helper tree. It can be whatever you would like to call it. But this tree has many, many branches. And what I'd like you to do now is take 5 different thoughts, beliefs that you have. Could be about yourself, about your situation, about the world, about anything at all. 5 beliefs that you think are definitely not helping you. I'll give you just a moment to pull those up. Sometimes it's a little challenging to figure out what those might be, and they don't have to be really deep, but these things that are just getting in your way. And now imagine that you are wrapping them in some cloth or some butcher paper or something that just kind of seals them up. Tie them off. They've got a little bit of string maybe, or yarn or something hanging off of them. And now as you look up at this big tree with all of these branches, you just toss up these beliefs that are holding you back, that are getting in your way, that are blocking you. and you just toss them up into the tree. And at some point, the string or whatever is wrapping them is going to get snagged on one of those branches. And then at some point, all 5 of your thoughts, your beliefs, are now hanging from this tree. And the tree can handle everything. It's not going to hurt the tree at all. And then with a nice deep breath, you continue walking on the path and just focus on leaving those thoughts there, leaving them in the tree. The tree will take care of them. You don't need them anymore. See how your body feels now, having released those. Maybe you feel a little bit lighter. Maybe it's confusing. Maybe you're unsure. Maybe you're excited. Whatever it is, pay attention to your body and what's going on for you as you continue walking on the path. And now you come to a second tree. And maybe it looks very similar to the first. Maybe it's completely different, whatever works for you. And this also is a helper tree, but it's a vibrant, alive experience tree, of adventure tree, whatever you'd like it to be, that's going to be moving forward, your new story tree, if you will. And what's going to happen now is as you start looking through the branches of this tree, you start to notice things hanging off. And as you start to reach toward these things that you're drawn toward, and maybe there's 100 different things there, but you're drawn toward some very specific ones. And of course, it's a big tree, so those branches might be up quite a ways. But as you start to reach your hand forward, those particular little packages, parcels, things that are hanging from the branches that you're drawn to the most are also gravitating toward you. And as you put your hand out, they just shift and release and float into your hand. Again, there's a ton of them up there, but for right now, 4 or 5 of them that are particularly calling out to you, you reach out and they find their way to you. And then you take a moment to unwrap what these are. And these are positive statements that are going to be the new reality. And maybe they're very direct opposites of what you just released at the worry tree. Maybe they're a little bit different. Maybe they're a realization that you weren't aware of something. And now it's kind of an aha. Oh, of course, I can think that. So just see what you're unwrapping, these 4 or 5 statements that are going to help you move forward, empower you, and create your new direction, your new story. And then you take these and kind of, fold them up, tuck them in your pack or your pockets or whatever you have, or just hold them in your hands. Send a little gratitude to the tree for its help. Being aware that all of those other things that are on the tree right now are all potential beliefs that you could incorporate. So you can come back anytime and say, what else is on here for me? What else is the perfect experience for me, or the perfect belief for me right now? So go ahead and turn around from your path, being aware of now how it feels to have these new thoughts, these new potential beliefs. Some might be surprising, some seem pretty obvious. Whatever they are, just knowing that you're bringing those back with you, and you're paying attention as you walk along this path again toward where we started. And as we continue, you look past and realize everything that you had released onto the worry tree is gone. It's just empty. It's taken care of it. And then you reach the end of the path and you have these new nuggets in your pack or your pockets. And you can use those going forward. And you might revisit those today, maybe even do a little journaling on it. What came up? What were these ideas? Were they amazing? Were they surprising? And just write them down, see how that works for you. All right. Well, thank you so much, as always, for joining me. And please do reach out if you ever have any questions. And if you would like to schedule a time for us to chat, if you're really struggling with things, I'm totally available, and that's free. And you can check out all of my other information on Linktree, which is my name, Tammy Gowen. Lots and lots of options, including my recent app, which is really, really exciting. So just check everything out and let me know if there's any other way that I can help you. And feel free to send me a note if you have something specific that you would like me to address on high sensitivity for a future show. So have a really great day. Tammy here, your guide on surviving to thriving. Have a fabulous day.